The early forest lay buried beneath a thick layer of mist, with faint beams of sunlight breaking through the tall canopy in scattered streaks. Myles and his fellow soldiers moved cautiously between damp tree trunks, each step heavy with the feeling that something unseen was watching them. No one spoke, yet tension hung in the cold air like a living presence. Myles stopped, his sharp eyes sweeping across the wall of greenery ahead. He had always been the most sensitive to subtle changes in the forest, and today that instinct felt even sharper. His breath dissolved into the mist, while his vigilance pulsed steadily with each heartbeat. A sudden, sharp sound echoed faintly from the distance, too unclear to identify, but clear enough to force the entire team into immediate cover. Myles pressed himself against the massive roots of an old tree, his hand tightening around the strap of his rifle. The forest seemed to hold its breath with him. From his hidden position, Myles glanced outward and spotted a friendly soldier far ahead, signaling them to halt. The quick, tense gesture confirmed what Myles already felt. There was danger lurking somewhere within the multi-layered foliage. Without warning, another soldier in an exposed spot collapsed to the ground. No one saw what struck him. It happened too fast, too quietly. Myles clenched his jaw as a cold ripple rushed down his spine. He focused every sense he had, his eyes darting through the leaves, searching for a glint, a shadow, or the slightest unnatural movement that might betray the enemy's position. Something was watching them. He felt it with absolute certainty. In an instant, Myles and several others bolted toward a cluster of rocks, sliding across the damp earth to reach cover. Harsh breaths and frantic footsteps crushed the dried leaves beneath them. Amid the chaos, the commander's voice rose, barking orders in an attempt to regain control of the pinned-down unit. Even with his attention honed on the unseen threat, Myles registered every word. Through the scattered noise, Myles remained unnervingly calm. He eased backward into the deep shadow of a thick bush, cloaking himself entirely from view. The world fell into disarray around him, but inside his mind there was only focus. His fingers tightened around his rifle. The tension mounted within him, but not a tremor touched his hands. It was the complete control he had spent months perfecting in the unforgiving forest. In the moment of stillness that followed, Myles saw clearly that his unit was trapped. They could neither advance nor retreat. They could only lie low beneath the oppressive canopy and hope the situation didn't worsen. Things were deteriorating quickly. Ahead, a group of soldiers struggled to pull a non-fatally wounded comrade to safety. Myles watched them, his expression hardening before settling into a quiet, internal resolve. He knew what he had to do. With slow, soundless movements, Myles began to slip away. While chaos consumed the rest of his team, he became a calm current, moving against the tide still, deliberate, and purposeful. Circling around the flank, he pushed through layers of thick undergrowth, heading toward a section of the forest none of the others would dare to approach. To Myles, this was the only path toward uncovering the hidden assailant. Gradually, his silhouette faded into the sea of green. To his comrades, he vanished. But to himself, this was merely the first step in a mission he had taken upon his own shoulders. Hunt the enemy before the enemy struck again. Finding a small pocket of safety, Myles settled down and pulled out his rifle. He began cleaning each component with slow, practiced motions, even though the weapon was already in good condition. Preparation, to him, was the foundation of survival. As he reassembled the bolt mechanism, his fingers moved with confident precision, as if he had performed this ritual thousands of times. Every motion was smooth and intentional, a silent ceremony before the hunt. He raised the rifle and peered through the scope, adjusting it with meticulous care to match the forest's shifting light and heavy humidity. The reflection of the green canopy shimmered across the lens. When everything was ready, Myles crawled up to a small ridge and settled into a patch of thick ferns. Lying prone, he checked his vantage point. From here, he could observe deeper into the areas most likely to conceal the hidden threat. He lifted his binoculars, scanning the distant tree line. Myles searched for the slightest anomaly, an unnatural movement, a break in the pattern of leaves, a faint metallic glimmer. Anything that betrayed human presence in the vast natural fortress surrounding him. Lowering the binoculars, Myles pulled out a small, weathered notebook and a short pencil. He began sketching the terrain before him, outlines of tree formations, potential blind spots, estimated distances. Every detail he recorded carried purpose, each marking a quiet calculation of survival and advantage. He examined the wind by plucking a single blade of grass and holding it in front of his face. The movement was subtle, almost ceremonial, yet it gave him essential information. Even the slightest breeze mattered to a marksman like him. Myles then lay flat, resting his rifle on a stone he had softened with a piece of cloth, ensuring perfect stability. Every part of his preparation was deliberate, as though he were constructing silence itself around him. He focused on his breathing, letting each inhale stretch and each exhale fade slowly. His chest rose and fell in a calm, rhythmic pattern. Stillness was his armor. Control was his greatest weapon. Through the scope, he suddenly caught a faint glint, so brief it could have been dismissed as stray sunlight. But Myles recognized it instantly. The distant shimmer of a rival scope hidden deep within the thicket. He did not react impulsively. Instead, he observed patiently, waiting to ensure the target was real and not a trick of the forest. His restraint was the quiet contrast to the urgency of the battlefield far behind him. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Myles placed his finger on the trigger. The movement held no aggression, only precise intention, as though he were aligning with the heartbeat of the forest itself. He exhaled one final time, letting the tension leave his body, and during the natural pause of his breath, he squeezed the trigger. His face remained emotionless, disciplined, and steady. Far away, a small branch snapped and fell, subtle proof that his shot had reached its mark. In a place where nothing seemed to move, the slightest disturbance carried meaning. Without hesitation, Myles pulled back the bolt of his rifle and began shifting to a new position. He never lingered after firing. Constant movement was the rule that kept him alive. Elsewhere in the forest, a pinned patrol cautiously rose from their desperate cover, realizing the threat had vanished. Confusion mixed with relief as they understood someone had intervened at the perfect moment. Their leader looked toward the distant trees from where the echo of salvation had come. He lifted his chin slightly, offering a subtle nod, a silent thanks to the unknown ally who had freed them. Watching from a new hidden vantage point, Myles observed the patrol regroup and continue forward. He felt no pride, no need to be seen. His only concern was the mission and the men who depended on unseen protection. Later, as he prepared for another phase of movement, Myles gathered leaves, twigs, and patches of foliage, attaching them to his uniform. Bit by bit, he blended into the forest until he became indistinguishable from it. He crossed a shallow stream with deliberate steps, placing his feet on stones instead of mud to avoid leaving tracks. Every action reflected a discipline forged through solitude and necessity. Using a small entrenching tool, Myles carved out a temporary hide in the dirt, shaping the earth to his form. The forest embraced him as if he were reshaping himself into part of the landscape. He then draped a camouflage net over the hide, layering it with mud and natural foliage until the position vanished into its surroundings. To anyone passing by, the ground would appear untouched. Only the faint silhouette of his rifle barrel remained visible, and even that was wrapped and dulled to avoid reflection. The final touch marked the completion of his preparation, a testament to his mastery of concealment. Back at the command post, officers studied their maps with grim expressions. Reports flowed in from scattered units, but none mentioned the silent force shifting the tide of the conflict from within the forest. The leader of the rescued patrol arrived, recounting what had happened. His words painted a picture of an unseen marksman whose timing was impossibly precise. For the first time, the officers looked toward Myles's area of operation with genuine curiosity rather than skepticism. Another soldier spoke up, emphasizing how the hidden marksman had shifted the situation with a single, decisive action. The officers exchanged uncertain glances. The forest had always been unpredictable, but this was something different. Later that day, one of the officers sought Myles out. He approached with cautious curiosity, observing the man who had been operating independently. His attention lingered on the well-maintained rifle Myles carried with quiet familiarity. Instead of reprimanding him for breaking formation, the officer questioned him about his methods. Myles answered calmly, offering only the necessary explanations, humility embedded in every word. When he opened his small notebook, the officer leaned closer. The pages filled with sketches, notes, and measurements revealed the depth of Myles's understanding of the terrain. It was not improvisation. It was a system. The officer nodded slowly, new respect forming in his expression. In Myles, he saw potential far greater than a standard rifleman. He saw a specialist shaped by the wilderness itself. Placing a firm hand on Myles's shoulder, the officer assigned him a critical task: to provide overwatch for an essential supply route that had recently come under threat. It was a mission of trust, not command. Myles accepted with a single nod. No questions, no hesitation. Between them, an unspoken understanding had taken route duty carried out through skill, not praise. With renewed purpose, Myles set off toward his new objective. Every step through the forest carried a sense of direction, no longer solitary, but empowered by the officer's confidence in him. He soon established a high-ground hide overlooking the narrow trail below. Concealed by ferns and thick soil, he became an invisible guardian watching over the fragile supply line. Through his binoculars, he observed a convoy of trucks creeping along the trail, engines muffled by the dense canopy. The forest felt tense, as though anticipating danger. Myles detected movement across the trail, the faint shift of leaves that did not match the wind. He remained perfectly still, tracking it with patience sharpened by experience. A single, precise shot from him neutralized the hidden threat, preparing to ambush the convoy. The danger dissolved as quickly as it had appeared. The lead truck's driver instinctively looked toward the ridge, though he could see nothing. Still, he nodded in silent gratitude to the unseen protector above. Myles continued watching until the last vehicle safely passed. Only when he was certain the route was secured did he slip quietly out of his position and fade back into the wilderness. Stories began to spread among the troops. Rumors of the ghost who guarded the supply lines. Soldiers spoke of him in hushed tones, half in awe, half in disbelief. Back at the command post, the officer who trusted Myles listened to the reports with a calm, satisfied expression. His gaze remained on the map, drawn to the area where Myles operated like a silent force. Soon, higher-ranking officers arrived, intrigued by the unusual but undeniably effective methods being reported. They demanded to know more about the man responsible. The officer pointed to a specific spot on the map, proposing a tactical shift, officially incorporating Myles's unique skills into their operational strategy. The room fell into thoughtful silence. Far away, unaware of the discussions surrounding him, Myles continued observing the forest from a quiet vantage point. His actions were beginning to reshape doctrine, though he sought no recognition. Suddenly, urgent radio chatter filled the command post. A large platoon had been pinned down and was in desperate need of assistance. Without hesitation, the decision was made. Myles would be sent in. The officer found Myles quickly, his expression grave. He explained the situation with urgency. An entire platoon trapped under relentless fire, unable to break free. The request was not an order. It was a plea delivered with complete trust. Myles listened in silence, absorbing the details. His face remained steady, but his eyes sharpened with fierce focus. He nodded once, then gathered his gear with swift, disciplined movements. He moved through the forest with silent determination, his pace controlled yet urgent. Every step took him closer to a battlefield he had not yet seen, but already understood through instinct alone. At the edge of the conflict, Myles spotted the pinned soldiers clinging to cover behind rocks and fallen logs. Fear and exhaustion had carved deep lines into their faces. They were trapped, exposed, and losing hope. Rather than approach head-on, Myles circled wide, searching for a vantage point that would give him a decisive angle. His mind mapped the terrain rapidly, identifying paths invisible to anyone without his experience. Dropping to his stomach, he crawled through mud and leaf litter, keeping his body flat against the earth. The forest pressed around him like a living weight, but he moved with the practiced ease of someone who belonged within it. A sudden shot tore through the air, embedding itself into a tree mere inches from his head. The bark exploded outward, showering him with splinters. Myles froze. The duel had begun, and he was no longer the hunter. He was the hunted. He steadied his breath and waited. The forest silence was no longer peaceful. It pulsed with danger. Myles knew the enemy marksman was skilled. This would not be a simple encounter. Shifting tactics, Myles slowed his movements even further, scrutinizing each shadow, each ripple of brush, searching for the smallest clue in the hostile maze around him. Reaching for his helmet, he placed it on a branch and nudged it slightly outward, exposing it just enough to mimic the shape of a head. It was a gamble, but a necessary one. Almost instantly, a shot cracked through the air, shattering the decoy. The enemy had taken the bait, revealing his impatience and his position. From his new spot, Myles caught the faint burst of light that betrayed the shooter's exact location. The forest no longer hid the enemy. It pointed straight at him. Myles pivoted smoothly, raising his rifle with movements refined by instinct and repetition. There was no panic, no wasted motion, only precision. He took a single breath, letting the world narrow into stillness. Then, with deliberate calm, he squeezed the trigger. There was no celebration, no outburst, only the quiet certainty of a completed action. Silence reclaimed the forest. Myles lowered his rifle slowly, feeling the tension drain from his body. The duel was over, and the threat had been ended. Far below, the trapped soldiers hesitated before rising from their positions. As the realization set in, relief washed over them. The unseen danger had vanished, replaced by an inexplicable calm. Their commander looked toward the distant ridge where Myles remained concealed. With deep respect, he raised his hand in a formal salute, an unspoken acknowledgement of the man who had saved them. Myles watched briefly from his hide, then slipped silently back into the forest's embrace. His job was done, and he felt no need to linger. Later, Myles found himself standing before a group of high-ranking officers in a briefing room. The officer who had trusted him from the beginning stood proudly by his side. His notebook lay open on the table, pages displaying meticulous sketches and strategies. The officers pored over his notes with intense interest, seeing not just tactics, but a new philosophy of warfare. A senior general gave a firm nod, granting approval to formalize Myles's methods. What began as improvisation had become doctrine, forged by necessity and perfected by instinct. Soon after, a new training ground emerged, dedicated to shaping soldiers using the principles Myles had mastered. The forest was no longer just a battlefield. It became a classroom. Myles, now an instructor, demonstrated the nuances of camouflage to a group of young recruits. They watched intently as he transformed himself into part of the environment. Barely recognizable, even a few feet away, he guided a recruit's hands gently, showing them how to adjust a rifle scope with deliberate precision. Every lesson he taught carried the weight of lived experience. The recruits scribbled notes furiously, their expressions a mixture of awe and determination. They knew they were learning from a legend, a man shaped by the forest's unforgiving silence. A printing press clattered in the background as pages rolled out diagrams, instructions, and tactical insights drawn directly from Myles's notebook. A new manual was being born. The completed manual's cover displayed illustrations taken from his sketches. His once private notes had become a cornerstone for future generations. Years later, a modern marksman flipped through a worn copy of that same manual. The techniques within were still relevant, still effective, still carrying Myles's quiet legacy forward. High above a contemporary training field, a sniper team practiced concealment and observation using the very methods Myles had developed. His influence lived on in every careful movement they made. As time blurred, his legacy remained steady. A final image lingered, a respectful portrait of Myles, the quiet soldier whose unseen actions reshaped warfare. His memory stood timeless, fading only into the deep green of the forest he had mastered. Don't forget to hit subscribe to discover more untold stories of World War II.